Hello guys, welcome to the Nexoel Trading Hub YouTube channel. So we are going to carry out the weekly forecast for the coming week. So what we can see here, last week we identified this buy side liquidity from the weekly time frame, and here we have the external buy side liquidity. We expected to see the push of price to the upside to take out this buy side liquidity, the internal range buy side liquidity. And in extension, you're looking forward to seeing price ticks out of the external buy side liquidity, because from the monthly time frame, we can see we have this price inefficiency, this fair value gap. So we're expecting more bullish move of price in the dollar index. And what we can see from the monthly time frame is that we are having this reaction of price within the monthly time frame rejection block zone. So we can see how price is respecting the rejection block zone. We can see how price is respecting the close of the bullish candle. And now what we can see is to expect to see the possibility of price cooling to the downside before we have the continuation of price to the upside to take out this buy side liquidity. So let's go to the weekly time frame. Here in the weekly time frame, you can clearly see our internal buy side liquidity that we identified, how price took out those buy side liquidity. So this is our external drawn liquidity, this buy side liquidity. We're expecting to see how price is going to take out this buy side liquidity. And we identified the rejection block level from the monthly time frame. Now we can see how price is reacting at that price level. So I'm expecting to see the push of price to the downside into this reclaim block before we have the bullish continuation to the upside. Because what we can see is that this is the sponsorship candle that led to the bearish move that took out all this sell side liquidity. So I'm expecting to see the reclaim of price to the downside, and then we have the bullish continuation to take out the external buy side liquidity we have here. So let's drop to the daily time frame. In the daily time frame, we can identify the zone we marked out from the weekly time frame as the reclaim block zone. We're expecting to see price get rebooked by that sponsorship zone, and then we have the bullish continuation. You can see how price took out this buy side liquidity, took out the relatively equal highs, giving us this buy side liquidity also. And we can see our rejection block price level, the zone we identified from the monthly time frame. So I'm expecting to see the possibility that price is actually going to face rejection at the monthly rejection block zone. And then we have the drop of price to the mean threshold of the reclaim block. And then we have the bullish continuation to the upside. But let's actually check out the 4-hour time frame to see a clear perspective to that. So here in the 4-hour time frame, what we can identify within our reclaim block zone is we are having this 4-hour order block. We're having the 4-hour order block resting here. And you can also see that the 4-hour order block reacted at the mean threshold of this reclaim block we identified from the weekly time frame. Now what we can see is price back to the downside. And now we have the push of price. Price failed to take out this high point. Now we have this bearish move that took out this sell side liquidity. So what we can see is the range price movements within the rejection block zone. So I'm expecting to see the possibility that price may fall to the order block zone, which is in confluence the reclaim block zone we identified, before we have the bullish continuation to the upside. Let's check the 1-hour time frame. Here in the 1-hour time frame, what we can clearly see is within the 4-hour order block zone, here in the 1 hour, you can see we have this institutional order flow, an unmitigated institutional order flow. And we can see the reclaim block zone. Now, what we can see from the 1-hour time frame is that we are having price giving us this bearish trend to the downside. So I'm expecting to see the possibility that price would take out this low point, which is actually last week low points, which is Friday's low points. So we could see how price would dip lower into this 4-hour order block, which in the 1 hour we can see this institutional order flow, and we can see the fair value gap, and then we can have the continuation of price to the upside to take out our external buy side liquidity. Or we could see that price may continue bullish, and then I would wait to see that price may get reclaimed by this zone, and then we have the bullish continuation to the upside. This is the USDCHF here, and this is the weekly time frame. Last week, I told us to expect more bullish move of price to the upside, since we expected to see bullish move in the dollar index. So for the USDCHF, where we have USD as the base currency, I also told us to expect more bullish move. We identify this inversion fair value gap, how we can see price return, face rejection, but then price broke through the inversion fair value gap and the order block. So I expected to see the push of price into the inversion fair value gap zone in confluence to this institutional order flow we have. But in extension, we are actually looking forward to see that price will take out this buy side liquidity if the dollar index continues bullish. So for the coming week, due to what we've identified in the dollar index, we're still expecting more bullish move in the USDCHF pair in confluence to the dollar index. But since we can see that price is reacting at the inversion fair value gap in confluence to this institutional order flow, so we could see the possibility of price rejection to the downside before we have the bullish continuation to take out this buy side liquidity. So let's drop to the daily time frame to look out for zones that we could see the possibility of price returning to before we have the bullish continuation. So here in the daily time frame, we can see we have this fair value gap. This is our weekly inversion fair value gap, and we can see how price is reacting at this order block, which is resting within the main threshold of the weekly inversion fair value gap. Now we have price took out this buy side liquidity, fill up this fair value gap. Now we have the reaction at this order block. This is our buy side liquidity. This is our draw on liquidity. So for the USDCHF pair, since we have this fair value gap already filled up, so I'm expecting to see the possibility of price rejection from this order block, which is within the main threshold of our weekly inversion fair value gap. And then we want to see price falls to this inversion fair value gap. And then we have the bullish continuation to the upside to take out the buy side liquidity. So guys, let's check the 4-hour time frame. Here in the 4-hour time frame, we can clearly see that within the daily inversion fair value gap, we also have this order block resting within the inversion fair value gap. And this is actually the bearish order block we identify within our weekly inversion fair value gap, where we are seeing price rejection. And now we have this fair value gap and we have the order block. So I'm expecting to see the possibility that price may continue bearish to the downside to come mitigate this inversion fair value gap we identify in the daily time frame. And in confluence, we can see we have this 4-hour order block. So price should reclaim to the downside before we have the bullish continuation to take out our buy side liquidity. So let's check the 1-hour time frame. In the 1-hour time frame, what we can clearly see, we are also having price giving us this bearish movement to the downside. We can see price pulled back, price pushed to the upside, took out this buy side liquidity, and now we have the fall of price to the downside. And now what we can see is price took out this low points. So price took out this low points. So we may have bearish continuation to the downside into the 4-hour order block we identify. We can also see we have the order block also in the 1-hour time frame. We have this fair value gap here. So we could see bearish continuation to mitigate this zone before we have the bullish push of price to the upside. So this is what I'm expecting to see in the USDCHF for the push of price to the downside before we have the bullish continuation to the upside. So let's check out the EURUSD pair. This is Euro USD, and this is a weekly time frame. So last week I told us to expect more bearish move to the downside since we expected to see bullish move in the dollar index. So we expected to see that the market would take out this internal sell side liquidity. Here we have our external sell side liquidity, which is our next draw on liquidity. Now we can see we have bearish momentum to the downside. Price broke through this order block that serves as support for price action. Now we can see price drop to the downside and then took out this order block. So what we can see is the possibility of further bearish move to the downside. Since we have this bearish momentum candle to the downside, we have the run on this sell side liquidity. So the external sell side liquidity is our next draw on liquidity. Since we are expecting more bullish push of price in the dollar index, so we should expect to see more bearish move in the Euro USD. Except the dollar index turns bearish, then we can expect to see bullish move in the Euro USD. So for the coming week, I'm expecting to see a form of a pullback that's going to be a bullish move before we have the bearish continuation to the downside to take out the sell side liquidity. So let's check the daily time frame. Here in the daily time frame, what we can identify is the run on the internal sell side liquidity. And this is the order block zone we identified from the weekly time frame that provided support for price to further push to the upside. And now we see price fell to the downside and took out that sponsorship zone, which from the daily time frame, we can see an institutional order flow. So for the coming week, I'm expecting to see the possibility that price would actually push to the upside. We could see price retest this sponsorship zone that price broke to the downside, and then we have the bearish continuation to the downside. So for us to actually take the bullish move to the upside, then we must identify structure in the lower time frame. Else we could see that price may just further continue bearish. So let's check the 4-hour time frame. Here in the 4-hour time frame, what we can see is bearish push of price to the downside, and we can see the zone we identified from the weekly time frame that price actually broke through to the downside. So what we are expecting to see if we are continuing bearish in the Euro USD is to see price return, and then we have the fall of price to the downside, because we can identify this order block in the 4-hour time frame. So we could see the return of price to this level, and then we have the bearish continuation to the downside. Let's check the 1-hour time frame. So this is the 1-hour time frame, and this is the 4-hour order block zone we identified from the 4-hour time frame. And here in the 1-hour time frame, we can also see we have this unmitigated order block, and we have this fair value gap. So we could see further bullish push of price to this zone, and then we have the bearish continuation to the downside. So let's check out the GBPUSD pair. So guys, this is GBPUSD, and this is the weekly time frame. What we can see is we had this bearish momentum to the downside. Price took out the sell side liquidity. We can see how price returned to this weekly fair value gap. Price faced rejection, but then last week we had bearish move of price to the downside, took out this low point, took out this low point also. Price did not respect the weekly order block. Price dropped to the downside. Since we saw in the dollar index, we framed bullish bias. So we expected to see bearish move of price in the Euro USD, the GBPUSD pair. Now, what we can see is this is the down close candle before the bullish move to the upside. Price have not mitigated this sponsorship zone. So I'm expecting to see that price may drop to the downside, and we could see the push of price. Price would retest the violated order block, and then we have further bearish move of price to the downside, taking out this sell side liquidity. Let's drop to the daily time frame. Here in the daily time frame, what we can see is within the weekly fair value gap where price faced rejection, but then price violated it, we can see we have that fair value gap now is going to act as an inversion fair value gap. So what we can see is this institutional order flow, which we identify the order block in the weekly time frame. So we can see how price is dropping into that zone. So we could see further push into the zone and then price face rejection, and we have bearish continuation. So what I'm trying to say is either we see that price may push to the upside, fill up this fair value gap, and then we have bearish continuation to the downside in the coming week. So let's check the 4-hour time frame. In the 4-hour time frame, what we can see also in the 4-hour time frame is the zone we're looking forward to see price rejection from. So we can see price did not really mitigate that zone, though we are having this rejection candle. So we have to wait to see price delivery to determine if price is going to give us the bullish push to the upside into this fair value gap before we have the fall of price to the downside, so that we have the bearish continuation. So this is my expectation in the GBPUSD. So let's check the USDJPY pair. So guys, this is USDJPY. This is a weekly time frame, and you must know that the weekly forecast, I'm just giving us a very quick one, just a projection. I'm not going into details. So let's look at the USDJPY pair. I told us to expect that bullish move to the upside into this price zone, because this is the bearish candle that sponsored this bullish move that took out this high. This is actually the entire bearish candle. But then since we have this within this bearish candle, I decided to mark out this. So we can see how price return and then price facing rejection at this particular down close candle before the bullish continuation that took out this high points. Now we can see price respecting the main threshold. So we have this as our buy side liquidity. This is our draw on liquidity, and we have also this fair value gap. So I'm expecting to see more bullish move also in the USDJPY, since we're expecting to see bullish move also in the dollar index, because the dollar index is actually bullish. So for the coming week, I'm expecting to see the possibility of price giving us a rejection to the downside before we have the bullish continuation. So let's drop to a lower time frame to identify that clearly. Here in the daily time frame, what we can see is this is our zone we identify from the weekly time frame, which we can call the breakout block zone. Now, what we can see is how price respected the main threshold and then dropped to the downside, giving us a down close candle below the main threshold of that zone. So this is our weekly inversion fair value gap. So I'm expecting to see the drop of price to the downside, and then we have our bullish continuation to the upside. So in the lower time frame, you can begin to frame your entry based on the structure you're going to see in the lower time frame to actually take the bullish move of price to the upside. Let's check the 4-hour time frame. In the 4-hour time frame, what we can identify from the 4-hour time frame is we can see how price return into the breakout block zone we identify from the weekly time frame. We have the fall of price. Price took out this low points. Price took out this low points, breached through the order block. But what we can see is that price is reacting at this order block. So we have to be very careful and look at price action in a lower time frame to consider going bullish, or wait to see price breaks through this order block, and then we possibly have a pullback into this fair value gap, and then we have the fall of price before we have the bullish move. So my expectation, clearly, what I'm just trying to say is we could see the possibility that price may react into this fair value gap. And then we have the fall of price to the downside, and then we have the bullish continuation to the upside. So this is my expectation in the USD JPY pair. I'm expecting to see the possibility that price would pull back into this fair value gap. price violated this order block. In confidence to this order block, we have this fair value gap. So price may push to the upside, mitigate the fair value gap and the violated order block. And then we have the fall of price to the downside. And then we have the bullish continuation to the upside. So this is my expectation in the USDJPY pair. So let's check the gold pair. So guys, this is gold and this is a weekly time frame. So last week I told us to expect more bearish move in the gold pair. We saw the sell side liquidity, and slightly below the sell side liquidity is our weekly fair value gap, which is now serving as an inversion fair value gap. So we expected to see how price will fall down to the weekly fair value gap before we could consider any bullish move. But then we can see price continue more bearish. But within this weekly fair value gap, I actually executed a bullish move from the 5-minute time frame. So now for the coming week, I'm expecting to see the possibility that price would push to the upside, maybe retest the weekly inversion fair value gap. And then we have our bearish continuation into this weekly fair value gap. We have this sell side liquidity, relatively equal low points. So let's check the daily time frame. In the daily time frame, what we can see from the daily time frame is we have the weekly fair value gap serving now as our inversion fair value gap. Price took out our sell side liquidity. So we can see the rejection price is facing within this fair value gap. Our price mitigated the main threshold, and then we have this rejection to the upside. So I'm expecting to see the possibility of price pushing to this inversion fair value gap, and then we have bearish move of price into this zone. Because what we can see in the daily time frame, price have not really mitigated this down close candle. Price is reacting within the fair value gap. So we could see the push of price. Price would be rebooked by this inversion fair value gap. And then we have the bearish continuation. So we have to wait to see price reaction, the structure within the zone, before we could consider the continuation of price to the downside into the weekly fair value gap. So this is what I'm expecting to see in gold for the coming week. Let's check the 4-hour time frame. In the 4-hour time frame, what we can see in the 4-hour time frame, can see price reacted within the weekly fair value gap, and then we have this push of price to the upside. Now we can see how this order block, price is failing to break the order block. Price return, push, price return again. We're seeing how price is rejecting also. Now we have in confluence to the inversion fair value gap in the weekly time frame. We have this fair value gap in the 4-hour time frame. So we could see this order block for the push price to the upside into this zone, and then we have the bearish continuation. We can also see we have this relatively equal high points. We have this liquidity resting above. So we could see price push to the upside, and then we have the fall to the downside. So let me show us guys actually the buy execution I took, the counter trend, so that we can also learn from that. So guys, this is the 5-minute time frame. I just want to have a quick review on the buy move I took in the gold pair. So we can see that we identified the weekly fair value gap, and so I expected to see a rejection from that zone. Now what we can see is price gave us this pullback. Price fell to the downside, took out this liquidity, and then we had this push of price to the upside that took out the buy side liquidity. So I saw this fair value gap and expected to see the return of price and then see the rejection that would happen there before I took the buy move. So what happened was price took out liquidity, price gave this push to the upside, took out buy side liquidity. Price left this fair value gap, price returned, and the fair value gap is in confluence with the main threshold of the weekly fair value gap. So you can see how we had this massive rejection to the upside. So this gave me the framework to expect the bullish move of price to the upside, because I saw this buy side liquidity and then this inefficiency. Though from the 4-hour time frame, I was targeting to see that price would take out this high points, but then price did not actually journey to this high points, take out this buy side liquidity. So what we can see is now price gave the fair value gap return the rejection. So I waited to see what price is going to do next. Price returned again, and then when I saw this bullish impulse from this candle, I decided to take an entry. And then price took out the buy side, expected buy side liquidity into this fair value gap. And then I was out of that particular trade. So this is how at times you can actually take an entry against trend when you identify a higher time frame zone. But I do not encourage that, and I would not advise you possibly do that except you've built a level of mastery. So this is all I have to show us, guys, for the coming week. So let's wait to see what happens when the market opens. Cheers and God bless you all.